Everybody, Sam Signorelli, H1 Fencing Supply. Welcome back to I Can Has Armory. Today we're going to put the weapons together. All the pieces, parts, and where they go. So we're starting with the foil. I already rewired this blade as in a previous video. It's ready to rock. So I'm going to take my foil guard first. The guard has a little notch right in the center, and that's where the wire lines up with. If you don't do that, you may cut the wire. So wire goes through the hole, and the groove's actually facing me. So is the groove in the notch in the guard. Goes on, making sure it's not going to catch anything. There it is. Next is the socket. Now, I use German sockets on my stuff. It's what I prefer to sell. The thing about a German socket, or any socket, is one of the most important things is make sure everything's tight. Because if it's loose, the box is going to think it's going to fire a light. So the first thing I'm going to do is throw the wrench, 8mm wrench for these nuts, flathead wrench, and make sure the C-line is tight, which it was. Now I'm going to take off the old wire since this was a rewire job. Back it off a bit. Pull the old wire out. There we go. Now, you do not have to put the wire on the top. The little hole in the center there is for the wire. You do not have to use it. Okay? Nothing says it has to go on the top. In fact, I put mine on the bottom because on the top it torques the wire around and contributes to wire breaks. Also, you do not have to use the entirety of the wire. This wire is up to here, this long. It's like 3 inches or 4 inches of wire. You don't have to use all that. All you need to do is like a 3/4 wrap around the post it's on in the direction of you tightening the nut, and that's pretty sufficient. If you have too much wire wrapped around it, you tighten up, it cuts itself, and you have almost something hanging on. Plus, you might have a tendency to leave extra wire hanging off, which is going to ground to the guard. You don't need that, okay? So I'm going to put this through. The wire goes through the hole on the base of the bracket. Okay. I'm going to put it on the underside between the bottom insulator, which is white in this case, and the small little flat washer above the nut. Crank it tight. And if you can see, it's a 3/4 wrap around. Here's the wires coming, okay? Not wrapped 50 million times around it. Grab the wrench, put it on the underside of the nut, crank it tight from the top. And nice and tight. I'm going to put this socket on the tang. So now we have a BC connection from the B for the wire through the bracket to the tang, there for the blade, the ground. I'm going to plug my box in again, my Dan box. I now have a closed circuit. I'm going to push it with my foot, open the circuit. Opens up, let go, reestablishes. So no circuit works. I'm going to fatigue break this excess wire off. That's it. Put the bracket all the way down. Make sure the wire is not under the bracket. It goes right through that hole because the bracket has a little notch as well for the wire. All has to line up. Small little bit of tape. I'm going to set the wire so it's going straight at me. It's in line with the groove, and put a line of tape down just behind it. That way it lines up with the notch. And I don't want this hanging off the side, so I'm going to pull another small bit. Hey, I passed the armorer's test. And so now it is taped down with 2 pieces of tape inside the guard. The pad goes on top. Then comes the grip. Now, a lot of grips, like this Belgian, have a very, very small shelf where the nut's going to compress against and hold everything together. They tend to be right at the front of the thumb hook. Other ones like the Zivkovich be a little farther back. The grip also has a little notch in the front. That's for the wire. So put it down. We have a lock washer. 1 lock washer. You don't need to put 4 or 5 in there to take up space. They work against each other. 1 is sufficient. In this case, the washer also gives the nut some place to push against. So we put it in there. And, okay, the washer's around there. I use outside hex nuts and outside hex wrench. Put that in. It's starting to go. Now I'm going to tighten this up until it just starts to snug. I'm going to stop for a second. So there's our snugging up, right there. Now, Still too loose. What am I doing? I'm lifting the pad, make sure that the notch and the wire line up so the grip doesn't crush the wire. It does line up, so I'm going to finish tightening this up a bit. There it goes. And nice and tight. Pull the wrench out. Make sure that it feels tight when I shake it around here. Feels good. Put my back together. Push a tip. Now if it's grounding, it won't fire. Perfectly fine. Last, I'm going to put the guard against this handle. If you hear a little beeping sound, that means that the guard is properly grounding, so a hit to the guard will not register. And that is how you assemble a foil blade. Next up, epee. Okay, next up, epee. This one's already been wired, and I'm going to put it together. Epee has two notches, one for a right-handed setup, one for a left-handed setup. What we do is rotate them. The problem with these notches a lot of times is they are not big enough for two insulated wires. They use the same punch for the same ones. So this tends to be a little on the narrow side. You might consider, as I often do, putting the guard down first and then putting the insulation on. In this case, because I actually disassembled an already assembled weapon, I'm going to see if I can get it on normally. This is actually a left-handed weapon, so I can make sure it's oriented left. There's that. As far as the guard orientation, it should be set so the wider part of the guard is to the outside, so it's like a saber guard. The socket, okay, now make sure this doesn't get caught in by the holes and bunched up down here below, which is almost doing. There it goes. So now I have the guard down, and there is no wire bunched up under the guard, between the guard and the shoulder to crush it. Again, the first thing I do with these sockets is I'm going to make sure everything's tight, because if you don't, you may have a problem. If the ground line is loose, it's not going to ground up properly. Make sure the ground stuff's in. There we go. This is a left-handed weapon. I'm going to go on the other side with it. Again, just like the foil, goes through the hole. Both of them will go through the hole. There we go. Now, because these wires are on the short side, because this is a disassembled weapon as opposed to a brand new one, I'm going to grab one of my favorite tools, my forceps. Very handy little tool to grab things. The teeth back here hold nice and closed. I'm going to grab one of these wires right at the very end, and I've already loosened the nuts, and this is on, and I can tighten it up. A note about placement of the wires. Number one, you can, I repeat, can, as in affirmative, use the mouse hole again. If you have a German socket and it's got the little mouse hole behind where the wires come through, you're allowed to use that again. The USFA took that away recently. Take those wires off. So that's not a problem anymore. No longer have to disassemble the weapon to get around that one. The wire still has to come up where the fingers can get to it, so it's typically in the back side between the back of the socket and the guard. And they haven't said, but you probably want to make sure the wires don't wrap around to the front for the same purpose. The whole reason so you can't mess with the fingers. So I'm holding it in place while I tighten it up. Okay, that's it. Break the excess off, and I'm going to test it. Box is on AB, which is for epee. Get with the foot again. Fine. Again, check sure it didn't ground anything out. Okay. Put it back in. Push the bracket down. Make sure the wire's not under it. And there we go. Then we have the pad. The grip. The washer, just like before, and the nut. Okay, what's going on? So it snugs up. Check it again, even more important in epee because there's 2 wires. Some of the notch in the grip is not very wide. Tighten it up. Well, now you may be wondering, what about tape? Well, here's the thing about tape inside the guard. There is no rule about tape inside the guard in an epee. There is none. No rule at all about tape in the guard in epee. What the rule says is that the ref must be able to lift the pad and look and visually see that the wires are in 2 separate sheets. If you have opaque tape over the wires, like this stuff, they can't see it. If you have clear tape, it's okay. Once more for the referees, if the tape over the wires is clear, it is legal. I've only seen it happen one time. That was actually a pentathlete, and we're quite shocked to know the rules, so that's fine. Gonna plug the box in here one more time, make sure it can ground anything. AB firing, BC no, AC no, and as before, test the grounding. There we go. epee is ready to rock. That is how you assemble a weapon. Happy armoring.